Hello, everyone. My name is Wendy, and today I'm doing an interpretation of Dana Coverstone's most recent dream, the Kicking the Can dream. In this dream, Dana discovers that the world has come to the end of the road as we know it. I love it when Dana gets dreams because God uses them to confirm and reinforce things that He is already in the process of teaching me. It's almost as if the Almighty is preparing me to do the interpretation in advance. In this dream, Dana feels the finality of things and knows that he can't keep kicking the can down the road. Over the years, I have reached out to Dana many times. Hopefully, after having this dream, he will begin to realize that I was right all along. And maybe, just maybe, he will focus on my past dream interpretations and reach out to me and lean upon my future instructions.
When I had the dream, I had a sense of finality. Now, I'm not saying I'm never going to have another dream I'm going to share. I dream every night. Matter of fact, I had a very, very vivid dream last night that I've written down and praying through. But I just had a sense of finality. And maybe you're thinking that because of the title and what happens in the dream, which I'm going to share in a minute. But this was the longest dream that I've had. It stretched over a 2-month period, and the pieces were not always necessarily in sequence, but they fit together during the week of February 11th, right after I hit 55 and started getting senior discounts all the way through February 18th. But I'm just going to start sharing the dream. So it's called the Kicking the Can dream. I was walking down the road that I grew up as a kid, and I walked off of my porch, and I grabbed a steel can, okay, a steel like vegetable can. And it appeared to be a spinach can from the 1960s because the wrapper around the paper wasn't vinyl, it wasn't glued on, it wasn't painted on, it was a paper wrapper. Reminded me of an old 60s style can, and it had spinach, a picture of spinach on it, okay? And so I start walking down the road that I grew up in, where I grew up in Jasonville, Indiana, South Meridian Street. And from where I lived, I could look 1 mile and 2/10 up the road at night and see the stoplight, okay? So I'm walking towards that stoplight, so to speak, in the dream. Over the distance that I was kicking the can, I was getting older. I was probably about 8 or 9 years old when I started kicking the can. As I kicked the can and I walked, I was getting older and grayer or losing hair. I was growing. I was getting older, and I kicked the can as far as I could. I reached the end of the road, and I was standing. I was facing an obvious drop off, and literally right. There was no further I could go, and there was like a cliff on the other side. Now the man that I see in my dreams was standing with his back towards me. And he turned and he faced me, and he gently tapped his shepherd's staff onto the right side of his head. And then he pointed at me.
In Dana's last dream, the doctor will see you now. An announcement is made that the doctor's office will be closing soon. I told people in my interpretation that this is the end of the season of the wine, and we are entering the season of the oil. It's the season of the Holy Spirit. In Dana's interpretation of this dream, he mentions that the can of spinach is empty. Well, actually, it's not empty. It's got air in it, and it represents the breath, the wind, the Spirit of God. Without words, the Jesus character uses his shepherd's staff and silently tells Dana to use his head to solve the mystery of this dream. The right side of the brain is our creative side. And so the Jesus character gives us a clue to use imagery and symbolism, not words. Dana is walking down the road, kicking the can, and he is aging as he does so. Because of his aging, we know that this road represents the passing of time. At the end of the road, he sees the Jesus character holding a shepherd's staff. If we use our imagination, we will recognize that this dream has similarities to the yellow horse dream that Dana had in the fall. Both dreams had a road that seemed to mysteriously end. And near the end of the road was the Jesus character with his shepherd's staff. In the yellow horse dream, the Jesus character was in the form of an Indian chief who was holding a medicine stick. In the yellow horse dream, the aging church was symbolized by horses. In this dream, the aging church is symbolized by Dana, who keeps kicking the can down the road. The can is spinach. Spinach is one of those health foods that a lot of people avoid eating. During the interpretation of the dream, Dana said that the image on the can of spinach looked like a cartoon. What cartoon do we know has a can of spinach? Popeye the Sailor Man. I did a Google search to find the old Popeye song. Instead, an old Popeye cartoon popped up. It's called I Am What I Am, which is a play on words for one of the things God said of himself. I am what I am. I watched the cartoon and I was surprised about all the prophetic symbolism. I'm not going to interpret it for this video, but watch it yourself and see what you see. Although there is a lot of scary imagery in this dream, the Jesus character is trying to let us know that we shouldn't take things so seriously. What is coming has been planned for a long time. In fact, it's been planned since the beginning of time. So don't fight it, don't resist it, just accept it. Dana was kicking the can down a road called South Meridian. The Almighty, Al Shaddai, doesn't add these details for nothing. What is a meridian? It's a separation line. It separates the north from the south. If we use our imagination, a meridian can also separate what is up from what is down. At the end of the road, Dana is given two options. He can go up or down. If you watch my videos in the Path to the Tree of Life playlist, you will see that this entire dream is about the importance of opening your third eye, because time is running out. The staff that Jesus used is a big clue of how to activate your third eye. It's your spine. It's your medicine stick.
Then I was in my car about to cross the Cumberland River on Highway 90 here in Burkesville, Kentucky. And as I cleared the bridge and headed in town, I saw this swarm of what appeared to be locusts. They came up on my car as I slowed to a stop, and they smeared my car with wings and blood. And after they had passed by, I got out, I pulled over, and I surveyed the mess. And I opened my trunk, and my trunk was full of boxes of rags. And what's significant is I kind of shared something a couple months ago about this on a Friday, on a Sunday morning. And a guy came to my church that Sunday morning from Missouri, and he had printed some shop rags for a ministry he was doing. And literally, his trunk was full of rags. So I said, okay, God, there's something about these rags I need to pay attention to. But anyway, I wiped the mess off of my car, opened the trunk full of rags. I began to wipe the windows clean with the rags. And then I did something I would never do. I threw the rags on the ground. I don't litter. I don't throw trash anywhere. I'm always looking for trash cans. But I just threw the rags that I had used to clean with right on the ground. And I used 5 of them. I then continued through the center of town when I saw another swarm, but this swarm was of bats. And I stopped my car again, and I felt the bats start hitting it with the intent to the point that the windows were cracking where they were denting the wipers and my hood. And after a few minutes, that swarm of bats flew off. I got out, realized that my car was not the only thing damaged, though. Buildings had broken windows, and there were dead bats on the ground. The blood and the bat parts were strewn over the street and other vehicles. And people were coming out of businesses and looking and trying to figure out what they'd just seen and what had just happened, okay? I opened my trunk, grabbed a handful of rags, and began wiping the windows down so that I could see. It took me much longer to wipe off this mess, and I used 10 rags. And once again, after I wiped the car, I would just throw them on the ground, which is unusual for me. And I used those 10 rags, left them on the ground, and I inventoried the remaining boxes in the trunk. I was making note of, okay, if anything else happens, I've got rags and how many I had. It seemed that there were at least 100 rags left in my trunk, and I got back in the car and headed down the road. I approached the stoplight, just like here in Brooksville. It was red, and I stopped, but I could see a much larger and more sinister cloud of something headed my way. There was a swarm of something coming my way. It covered the entire sky, and it was headed towards me at a high rate of speed. I turned my car around quickly, did a donut, turned my wheel, and headed back towards my house at the stoplight, okay? High rate of speed. But I could see the swarm following me and getting closer as I went. I finally got to my house. I ran into the house, and just as I shut the door, I could hear banging, like something was hitting the door from outside. And the wind began to howl, it picked up to the point it was making the house shake and move.
This part of the dream takes place in Brooksville. A brook is a stream of water. Remember, Popeye is a sailor man. The imaginary watery road that Dana is driving on represents the cerebral spinal fluid, along with his spiritual journey. The Cumberland River is a clue that a person's spiritual journey is cumbersome. Now remember, Dana was kicking the can down South Meridian Road in his hometown. A meridian can also mean a set of pathways in the body along which the vital energy is said to flow. And so South Meridian, in conjunction with Brooksville, lets us know that we are dealing with the lower pathways in which energy flows. People who are traveling on their spiritual journeys face challenges. The plagues in Dana's dream represent the challenges that we must face. Once you conquer those challenges, you get to level up. The first plagues were locusts. In the Bible, the locust has a connection with the pit of hell, which is the root chakra. Because Dana passed the tests of the first challenge, he's able to take a moment to clean his car before going on to the next challenge. Because of this, he gets to level up. Then he has to face the challenge of the bats, which are a nocturnal animal. It's connected to the sacral chakra. Dana had to use twice as many rags to clean his car after this attack because it's twice as challenging. But once he passed that challenge, he got to level up again. Then, Dana hit a red light while in the solar plexus chakra. This lets him know that he has work to do on himself to help him pass the test. The plague for this chakra is wind. His spiritual journey has come to a halt, and he runs back to the comfort of his personal beliefs, which are contrary to the teachings of Yahweh, who is the invisible God of the Old Testament, who is the I am what I am. Dana said that something was banging on the door as the wind was howling. A few years ago, I reached out to Dana, and I told him about my Bible project, but he rejected me because he didn't think that I was qualified to reinterpret the Bible. Then he had the "Who are you?" dream, where a ghostly hand was knocking on the door, yet he refused to open it. God chose to use this ghostly hand as an avatar for me, to prove that I was qualified and had the authority to reinterpret the Bible.
Then the next thing I saw was I was walking down a big city street, and the few people that were out there were standing right next to the buildings and looking up in absolute fear. They were hiding underneath the awnings and looking up into the sky. And I could not see anything in the dark sky, but definitely sensed there was something up there, and it was ominous in that regards. I watched, though, as people took off running, and I took off running too, but I kept looking up as I ran. And I suddenly saw 3 large red dragons, and they swooped down holding some kind of fabric in their talons. All 3 of them approached the people who were running and threw the fabric over them. So all 3 are by themselves. They're throwing fabric on these people. And what it looks like, it's fabric, but it looks like it's alive. It's got its energy. It's moving. Okay. And when they threw the fabric when they dropped the fabric on these people, it seemed to tie them to the ground. And I watched as about 10 people were tied to the ground the same way. And then looking up, I saw that there were more red dragons huddled together in the skies, as if literally they were conversing. And they flapped their wings rapidly and aggressively, and one was directing their attention to the earth. I reached into my pocket, and I grabbed a bottle of oil, and I ran to the people that had been tied down. And I poured oil on the fabric that the dragons had dropped onto the people. And the fabric began to move like it was in pain. It was writhing, it was moving, it was shifting. And it started to let the people go, and it flew off of them, literally like it didn't have wings, but the fabric just kind of flew off, like it had been rebuked or something. And then I ran from person to person, pouring the oil on the people who were still held down. And the dragons in the sky all screamed, they hissed mercilessly, and they headed back to the area. And the people scattered. They went into open doors in some of the buildings, and people were breaking windows to get into businesses to stay safe from these dragons.
In this scene of the dream, we're going to look at a person's spiritual journey from a different perspective, upwards. Those red dragons represent spiritual stoplights. You're stuck at that stoplight until you pass the challenge and level up. The dark fabric represents the negative energy that exists in the lower 3 chakras. These are people who are in the pit. They're in the grave. They're spiritually dead. They're blind. The reason why Dana has oil that can fight off the negative energy is because he has already passed 2 challenges. Similar to mercury in the thermometer, this oil ascends up to a certain level based on what frequency you resonate at. Where did Dana get the oil? If you recall from Dana's last dream, The Doctor Will See You Now, he got the oil from a prophetic woman who could echo the words of Jesus. She poured the oil in several men's hands just as the doctor's office was closing. Although this negative energy is very real, it becomes ineffective to people who have taken the spiritual journey and have ascended to a higher level of understanding.
At this point, though, the dragons turned into military-style aircraft, and I saw them fly over the west coast, or one fly over the west coast, one over the Midwest, and one over the east coast. And all 3 dragons dropped what appeared to be missiles. It looked like missiles to me, being dropped from the plane, dropped from the military aircraft, and then heading towards the ground. They landed with a hard impact and a boom, but they did not explode in any of the places they were dropped. So it was like it was almost like an impact tremor from when these things hit, and it was harsh, it was firm, but they did not explode.
All right, let's use our imagination. All this does is reinforce what I've already said. The bombs are the same plagues, just in a different form. The bombs don't explode because they are the challenges associated with darkness. You have to get out of the windstorm plague of the solar plexus chakra before you can begin to see the light. The solar plexus is connected to the stomach. To pass this challenge, you have to watch what you eat.
And then I saw crops begin to die in the Midwest, and I saw farmland for sale at less than $100 per acre. I saw people leaving their homes in the West with suitcases in hand, and they were walking towards retail businesses like Walmarts or box stores that had been converted into apartments that were not very large at all. And the people were being served food bags when they walked in, and they were given directions to where to go. And after the thousands of people were in these buildings, an alarm sounded, and an electric fence came up from the ground, and it surrounded the facility. And the one stark thing that stands out that I saw in the dream was that the security and the leaders were all on the outside of the facility, and now they were heavily armed. And they had not been that way when the people were going into the building.
That pop sound that happened when Dana mentioned the alarm was not an accident. The Almighty did that to emphasize the seriousness of the situation and give you a clue that it has to do with sound frequency. In the Bible, only 144,000 received the seal of God. Like this dream, the book of Revelation is full of symbols, and the 144,000 represents a nation, not an exact number. Because this dream is about using your creativity and symbolism, Walmart is not an evil corporation to be afraid of in this dream. Walmart symbolizes a heavily guarded facility that supplies all your needs. The food that it gives is spiritual guidance, and the people who work there are people like me. Most of us don't have high-paying jobs, and we don't drive fancy cars, because we've devoted our entire lives to serving God. We're the conspiracy theorists who took the spiritual journey and woke up. We're the ones who have been ignored and mocked for years. But now the can has been kicked to the end of the road, and now people are going to come running to us for advice. Why? Because we're the ones with real spiritual power. We're the ones who can move spiritual mountains. Did you know that the pyramid in Giza has a king's and queen's chamber? And both of them have a connection with 144,000 hertz. If we use our imagination, our brain has two separate chambers also, the left and right hemispheres. Because they are opposite of one another, one is logical, one is creative, we can also consider them one is male, one is female, or even one is black, one is white, one is darkness, and one is light, or God forbid, one is good and one is evil. When the male and female sides of our brain, the logical and the creative sides, are resonating at the same frequency, then amazing revelations can happen, and people become enlightened.
On the East Coast, I saw a museum, and it was a museum of fiat currency from around the world, highlighting that the dollar was gone. Wall Street was totally empty, and the starting bell, which is always triggered and hit and banged on when the markets open, it was part of a statue. It really was more like a pole. It was on a pole, and it was up high enough that no one was ever going to be able to reach the bell on the top. Okay, it was almost like, I told Sheree, it reminded me of the poles in the Old Testament that the non-Jewish people groups would build and worship and those sort of things. But this square where the bell was on top of that pole, the statue, was littered with trash and people sleeping in the streets. Burn barrels were keeping people warm, and they were burning boxes. They were literally burning boxes of American flags. And when I was a kid, my dad was a commander of the American Legion, and I remember they had a room and they just had boxes of flags, where the flags were folded inside the boxes, and they would use those at funerals and things like that. Those were the boxes that they were throwing into the fire, and they were shaking their fists in the air. They were also thanking the dragons for exposing the true nature of America. And the dragons were flying over the respective areas, west, midwest, and east, and they were watching closely.
The homeless people who were on top of the square with the bell are the watchmen, who are meant to sound the alarm. They can see things from a higher elevation. They're homeless because they don't have a loyalty to any country or religion. They're surrounded by garbage because they don't have any respect for material things. Do you remember how Dana threw the 5 cloths down on the floor after cleaning his car from the locust mess? The first challenge? This shows that Dana isn't motivated by money and material things. They're shaking their fists because they have power and authority that God gave them. They thank the dragons because they can see that the true nature of America is that it's in the pit. They're the ones who are taking their spiritual journey and elevating.
Then I was back at the end of the road with the man standing right next to the cliff. He told me to kick the can as hard as I could. I took a few steps back, and he faced me with his hands in the air like a referee. Like when a referee does this for a touchdown or something, he did that. And I'm not a big football fan, and I may have even just messed that up. But the arms were straight up in the air, almost like he was making a goal for me to kick over. So I took a few steps back. I ran towards the can, and I kicked it, and it soared right between his arms. He just watched the can go through his hands and then turned as it went over the cliff. I walked up beside him, and I realized that the cliff had no bottom to it, and the can was still dropping into the darkness. He just watched it continue to fall, and then he spoke and he said this: "The world is at the end of the road as they know it, and the reality they deny is going to hit the bottom hard and shock those that don't know. You who are witnesses of mine have but moments, because the can has no more road to be kicked down. Focus and reach and lean on my spirit. Stay filled with the fire and fight the deception that is already working in my church."
The deception that is already working in the church is not what I'm teaching, the season of the oil, the season of the Holy Spirit, the season of the millennial reign. The true deception in the church is that they follow their man-made laws and reject the commandments of God. Many believers are blind and don't see the truth. I already identified who and what that can of spinach represents. It's the power of the Holy Spirit. The wind in that small, still vessel had more explosive power than any of the bombs, and it shined a brilliant light for those who are in darkness.
Know my word and fortify yourself with it and in it. The sky is falling, but you must help catch those who are falling with it. I am coming quickly, so stay on the road and bring others with you.
The sky is falling is a reference to another cartoon. And in that cartoon, everyone is so frightened that the world was going to come to an end. But it turned out they didn't have to be afraid after all. We are in a season of change, and change can be scary. But if we put our trust in God and know that He has our best interest in mind, we can save ourselves a lot of unnecessary grief. A few years ago, back when Dana had pneumonia, he mentioned that he had a Charlie Brown dream. If I remember right, I think he was supposed to kick a football. All of this is telling us that we shouldn't take things so seriously. God is in control of everything. The Jesus character holding up his hands like a football field goal was more than a coincidence. They represent the two scepters of the male and female energy of the brain, and the football is in the shape of an eye. If we use our imagination, we can see that it's the all-seeing eye. If you push your imagination just a little further, you might start to see a few more things, like a tuning fork and the world in harmony, or a rabbit ear television, or aliens, or something a little more scary. Sometimes change is scary. Or we can go even further back, to biblical times. Yahweh had a problem with people worshiping the golden calf. He never said you couldn't become one. Didn't he tell Moses, "You shall be like God, and Aaron will be your prophet"? One day, I dreamt that I was working on my Bible project, and suddenly I read a new passage. It said, "Blessed is he who does the will of God, for he is God." In the book of John, Yahushua, Jesus, talks about becoming one with him and God the Father. Although some of this looks and seems very scary, it shouldn't be. It's all biblical.
I suddenly heard the can hit the bottom, the sky went dark, and clouds rolled in, and thunder started rolling up from where the can had gone over the cliff. So I'm seeing all the things in the air, but the thunder wasn't, it was coming up from where the can had gone over. And then a huge lightning strike revealed the landscape with fields of harvest, and I saw parked tractors and parked combines. And I yelled out, "I need some help over here," because those fields of harvest weren't going to be taken care of with parked tractors and combines. And I yelled out, "I need some help over here." And I saw people one by one begin to come. And that's when I woke up.
What's very interesting is that Dana's dreams started coming in their correct order on February 11th. The Super Bowl was on February 11th. Guess who won? The Chiefs. And so you see, God is in control of everything. The Chiefs are from Kansas City. Kansas means south wind people. In the Bible, the south wind represents revival. And so the Almighty is using Dana through this dream to kick off revival as the can of southern wind goes down into the pit and breathes life into dry bones. The menorah was located on the south side of the tabernacle. The oil-fed lamps of the menorah are biblical representations of the 7 energy centers in our bodies. However, we are a microcosm of the macrocosm, and so these energy centers also exist in the world and in the universe. And so the chiefs are from the city of the southern wind people, which basically means that they are the saints of the New Jerusalem. The can of wind exploding in the pit of hell which is the dark, negative, judgmental energy that many people live in, lets us know that God plans to turn on the lights as He brings the New Jerusalem down into the 3D. However, getting into the New Jerusalem isn't easy. It requires self-discipline, obedience to God, and a leap of faith. The author of creation, who is very creative, has given us a lot of puzzle pieces. He has linked Indian chiefs with football and the New Jerusalem. Believe it or not, he even used the Super Bowl halftime show to help usher in the new millennium. In a future video, I'm going to interpret the halftime show. If you're interested in watching it, please subscribe. My name is Wendy, and we're all living in the winds of change.